We're trying something new this time and taking advantage of our presenters' Spanish language abilities. So when I send out this event recording for today's webinar in English, I will also be including a link to a recording of the full webinar in Spanish. And our presenter today is Dr. Stephanie K. Johnson, Associate Professor at University of Colorado Boulder. And with that, Stephanie, I will go ahead and give it to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you all for joining me today for this webinar. Today I get to tell you a little about a project that we've been working on in collaboration with CPWR for the last 5 years. But really, this project actually started even 5 years before that in CPWR's previous funding cycle when we worked on a project on safety leadership in apprentices. And now this is focused more on safety leadership among foremen. And I'm going to tell you about specifically today the focus on releasing a Foundations for Safety Leadership in Spanish. For reasons that I'll go through and just the large population of Spanish-speaking workers and the increased need for safety, CPWR and I both really agreed that there needed to be a FSL in Spanish. I'm going to click down here. This is me, Stephanie Johnson. I'm a professor at the University of Colorado, as Jessica said, and I've been working with CPWR for about 10 years now, and it's actually been a really great experience in my life. And part of the reason that I really thought doing the Spanish-speaking FSL was so important is because I realized as a professor how hard it is to learn anything new. And if you add on top of that learning something new in a language other than your native language, it just becomes really difficult. Even if you speak English, the idea of really mastering these skills in another language is just tough. I'll also introduce you here to Marissa Belden, who's worked on this project for the last 4 years and put together the amazing PowerPoint. If I put this together, it would not look so beautiful. So thank you, Marissa, who's sitting here today. Okay, I want to move on to start talking about the Foundations for Safety Leadership program. So I wanted to just start by talking about what safety leadership is. When we started this project, we asked construction leaders, what makes a world-class safety program? And one of the main factors that they pointed to was safety leadership. Safety leadership involves leading in a way that really elicits safe behavior from crew members. And the goal is to create a stronger safety climate, which we know is a strong leading indicator of accidents and injuries at work. But really, there was a lack of safety leadership programs out there. We found that some unions offered safety programs, and some of the very large contractors had safety programs, but there really wasn't anything that all construction contractors could use. Even within the OSHA 30, there's nothing that really focused on safety leadership. So in 2013, we started this work to create a safety leadership program with the goal of having something that everyone could use. And specifically, we wanted it to be offered as an elective through the OSHA 30, which it now is, so that's pretty amazing. All of this work was done with a great team of industry experts because we wanted to make sure that it really made sense and felt authentic to construction workers. And we wanted to deliver the best material possible. And the product that we came up with is the Foundations for Safety Leadership program. And I mentioned already that it's offered through the OSHA 30, but importantly, you can also download all the materials for free from CPWR's website. So I'd love to tell you a little more about the FSL course. It stands for Foundations for Safety Leadership, and it's a course that teaches foremen and lead workers the skills that they need to be safety leaders. And the idea is to have a really interactive and hands-on learning situation so that after they cover the 5 safety leadership skills, which are listed here on this slide on the left, we actually have students practice applying them using realistic construction scenarios that they can either watch. We have created videos that people can watch, or they can do reading along. They're like printed out, or they can do role plays in groups. There's a lot of different ways for instructors to kind of mix the material up to keep the energy going in the room. The skills that were identified, and these were primarily identified by the industry experts we worked with, but they also align with what we know about leadership theory more generally. The skills are first leading by example, engaging and empowering team members, actively listening and practicing three-way communication, which is a concept that is, the idea is you state something to someone, give an instruction, ask them to explain it back to you to make sure they've understood it correctly, and then you can tell them that they're correct. And then developing and recognizing team members. And what's important about the FSL is that all of these skills are taught in relation to safety. So it's not just leading by example in general, but it's leading by example when it comes to safety. We've done a few webinars already on the FSL, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but I thought I would just share some updated numbers about how popular the FSL has been since we launched it. So since January of 2017, we have gotten a lot of interest in using the materials. And the total number of downloads for all of the FSL course materials and documents was 19,808 when we put this presentation together. And OSHA Ed Centers reported delivering over 600 FSL classes, reaching more than 6,600 students. 75 FSL classes have been delivered to over 1,000 students in OSHA 500 level classes. So we're really proud of the reach that the FSL has had. When we approached OSHA about delivering this course, one of the things that we really wanted to have was an evidence-based data that said that the FSL really works. So I'll share just a little bit about that here. We did an intervention study as we developed the FSL with 20 construction companies from across the United States. Most of them were from here in Colorado, but we also had some on the East Coast and in the Midwest. And basically we surveyed 286 leaders with 1,173 crew members. And we surveyed them both before they took the FSL and after they took the FSL. And what we were looking for was whether the leaders actually changed their safety leadership behavior. And we found that leaders' ratings of their crew's safety reporting and safety behaviors increased following the leaders taking the FSL. So we thought that was good evidence that the FSL was actually impacting leader behavior and follower behavior at work on job sites. I'll also add a little color to the numbers that I already shared about the positive reactions to the FSL. So after we did that initial study, we went back sometime later, 2 months later to a year later, and talked to safety directors and company owners who had crews on from their organizations participate in the FSL. And we asked them, now 2 months later or a year later, what have you noticed about how things have changed on job sites? And so rather than read you these quotes, I'm actually going to play them here so you can hear it from the safety directors and owners themselves. So here's the first one.
Honestly, it was perfect timing for us as a company because we were looking for a supervisory training course for the foreman. So I said, that's great. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. The information is already there. I presented the information in July, so the first class, I think, was kind of testing the waters, figuring out how I was going to deliver that. So I thought it went very well the first class, but I thought the second class was even better because I had more content in my mind and how to deliver it from the first class. So we do anticipate doing this on an annual basis because we'll have new supervisors that definitely need to go through this.
I really loved that idea of doing the FSL on an annual basis so more and more people can go through it. That's just one of the ways that organizations can use the FSL because the materials are free to download and you can deliver them yourself. I will share another quote here.
I know that we have had stuff up, you know, that matters. And we've actually made changes on site or brought to the attention of people who can make changes because of what our guys are bringing up.
And I'll give you one final quote.
The feedback immediately after was very positive. Even the day after, 2 days after one of the former would be in that training, they come up to me specifically, go out of their way, come up to me and say, "Wow, that was so great. Thanks for doing that. Never seen anything like that." These aren't dramatically new skills. They didn't come out of nowhere. They've been around, but they've never seen us presented in this way that apply directly to what they do in their jobs. So it's pretty exciting to see that reaction.
I was particularly excited about that quote because I rarely hear anyone being super excited and enthusiastic about training. It's usually like one more thing you have to do, and we all have very busy schedules. Construction crews work on very tight schedules. So the idea that people actually found this to be a really positive experience and were really excited about it, it just really resonated with me. So let me tell you a little more about the FSL materials. So all of the FSL course materials and the supporting materials are available on CPWR's webpage for free. And this major announcement that we have today is that they're now available in both English and Spanish. And so that includes the PowerPoint slides, which are also super beautiful. An instructor guide for preparing to teach the FSL. So we have a guide for if an organization wants to teach it themselves, a way for the instructors to kind of learn the rules of the road and have tips and tricks for teaching the FSL. We also have a student handout for leaders to follow along during the class and take notes. And you can use additional resources that we've uploaded like toolbox talks, an FSL handbook, train the trainer slide. So if someone in your organization has taught the FSL or is familiar with the FSL, we actually have information for them to train others to deliver the FSL. We also created hard hat stickers with the FSL logo on it so people could wear with pride evidence that they had participated in the FSL. And so we share all those materials for free in hopes that companies, unions, or even individuals will take the initiative to learn more about safety. So why Spanish? After completing the research study that I described already, our next priority was really to address this clear need for making the FSL available to Spanish-speaking leaders. When we did that study, many of the companies that we interacted with talked about the need for having materials, both our surveys, but the FSL course available in Spanish. And so it was really apparent that this was a needed step. I'm sure many people who are listening to this are really aware of this need, but data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show that 36% of construction workers are Hispanic and 25% of frontline supervisors are Hispanic. Data from the U.S. Department of Labor shows that the rate of work-related fatal injuries is actually highest among Hispanic workers. So to not be delivering this really great safety material to Hispanic workers seemed like a huge hole in our project, and so we're really proud to have completed this Spanish version. Because we were really interested in this idea, we actually used our existing data to conduct some analysis looking at the effect of having more Spanish-speaking workers on crews. And what we were really looking for is when you have more diversity on a crew in terms of the number of languages spoken, how does that impact safety? And what we found, surprisingly, is that actually having greater diversity, more like the greatest diversity being 50% English-speaking, 50% native Spanish-speaking, was related to the highest safety compliance and safety participation. And so that, to me, really spoke to the fact that having diversity on crews is actually a good thing. And what we found is that having greater diversity actually changed leaders' behavior. So they were focused more on making sure everyone was doing things safely, and that resulted in better safety outcomes. So like I said at the start of this, we recognize the need to improve work-related health outcomes in construction and understand the language barriers that affect these outcomes. So we are very happy and proud to announce that all of our FSL materials are now available in Spanish. We believe that if you offer the FSL in Spanish and in English, that we'll have safer job sites and safer crews led by better safety leaders. We know it is just so difficult to learn new information. We're bombarded by so much information every day. So imagine trying to master new skills in another language. It's just a really tough thing to do. And even when I created the webinar in Spanish, it was pretty exhausting to speak. And for me, I don't speak Spanish all the time, to deliver a webinar in Spanish. So I know how exhausting it must be for workers to try to take a training in a language that's not their native language. We believe that teams with more Spanish-speaking workers will benefit from having their leaders take the FSL, and in fact, all teams benefit when there's more diversity on the team in terms of safety outcomes. So to me, it's just a really big win-win to have greater diversity on crews and have everyone have access to the FSL. I want to thank you all very much for your attention, for listening to this. Here is the link if you want to download any of these materials, and I understand we're going to open it up for questions.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. One thing before I ask any questions, and I put this in the chat box, I should have also mentioned it in my introduction. But for those of you who may not have attended previous webinars on the FSL, we do have a webinar recorded about exactly, what is in these videos and slides and role-playing activities, and it really gets into the details of what the FSL is. So I will also send that out in my follow-up email to this event for anyone who's interested in that more detailed information. Okay. And our first question is, can you tell us when the results of the evaluation and impact study will be published?
Ooh, that's a great question. So we actually submitted the evaluation study to a journal, and it's under review right now. They have, I don't know that their timelines are terribly fast to get the data actually published, but once the paper is accepted, we're super happy to share it with anyone who's interested. So please feel free to reach out, send me an email, or send an email to Linda Goldenhar, and we can share the data with you, because I think the findings are pretty powerful.
Okay. The next question is, a large number of Hispanic workers are in residential construction, and I believe that a significant number of these residential workers are being treated as independent contractors. How did that number impact your statistics of Spanish-speaking workers and the impact the FSL had?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So none of the contractors that we used were in residential. So we only used more commercial contractors and just a wide array of industries. But that is true. And, I don't know a really great way for us to reach all those, air quote, independent contractors to get them the FSL. But I think word of mouth, and we have like a pretty large social media campaign, would be a great way to get to them so they can download these materials, because we all know that accidents and injuries are very high in residential construction, so it would be great to get these materials to them.
Okay, the next question is, can you teach or present the FSL in either language in a webinar format? Does it have to be in person, or can it be taught in a web-based format?
Man, that's a great question. So right now, we've only taught it face-to-face, but I think it's possible to deliver it in a webinar. I think, so just in my experience sitting in the classrooms when the training was going on, I feel like so much of the richness of the material for the FSL comes from the conversations that people have, the real examples of, this is the problem I'm facing on job sites, and a way other people weigh in to talk about how these specific skills that we cover could really help. So I feel like the webinar, if people aren't interacting as much, isn't going to have that same richness of interaction. That being said, realistically, I would say some training or exposure to these ideas has got to be better than no training. And I think it would be just a really great idea to have a way to get the training to people in like a web-based format, especially in what we call like a micro-training format where people can watch a little bit at a time. Otherwise, if you sit, you probably even felt this in my 20-minute presentation, it's hard to pay attention to something just like watching it on your screen for 2 hours, right, as opposed to sitting in a classroom where you're talking to other people for 2 hours. So maybe if we could deliver it in some way that's like short bites, that people could get exposure to it, and then reminders and refreshers, kind of like on an at-will or at-need basis. I think that could actually be pretty powerful. Great question.
All right, next question. Are health and well-being included in FSL to reflect the total worker health strategy?
Oh, man. No, we didn't include those elements. You should talk to Natalie Schwatka, who worked on this project. We should. It definitely should. Those things are so important. We could only tackle so much in this 5-year grant, and we could only get so much information into a 2-hour training course in the OSHA 30, so we didn't include those things. But I really appreciate your question because those things are just imperative to look at total worker health and not just accidents and injuries is one thing, but we know there's other things like high incidences of drug and alcohol use and construction work. So I think taking that broader perspective is actually really insightful.
Okay. This is probably going to be the same answer, but sort of a similar question. Has home safety been included in the FSL or the supplemental materials and examples?
No, we haven't, but we definitely could. Small, like things like that we could add even after we finished. I'm taking a note on that. Creating the FSL materials, it's ideas like that caused us to create these additional products like the toolbox talks. Someone raised that point and we're like, that's a great idea. So I feel like something like home safety would be a great additional tool that we could offer through CPWR. So thanks for that suggestion.
Okay. And we just have a comment from Natalie that in Colorado, we are addressing total worker health leadership through our NIOSH Total Worker Health Center of Excellence grant. And she would be happy to talk about leadership training and total worker health with anyone who's interested. So maybe if anyone would like to talk to Natalie, you can just send me an email and then I can connect the two of you.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie.
Let's see, next question. Can the FSL be used in the field on an iPad or on iPhone?
Oh, I think it should be. We didn't design it that way, but there's really no reason it couldn't be used in a mobile format like that. Some of our, a previous project that I worked on, it was more in mining, but they did just that. They put all their trainings on iPad and all the questionnaires and all the materials, because people are really remote, and so it's just a huge lift to get people into an office to give them training. Like, my previous comment of we only had so much time and so much bandwidth, we didn't put it on iPads or in like more a mobile technology format because our real goal was to get it incorporated into the OSHA 30. But if I had my way, I feel like that would be just a really great next step, because with our goal of trying to get this information and material to as many people as possible, I think that's a great way to do it. And not to mention the fact that I think that's how most people learn today, right? If you think of millennials and Gen Z, they're just used to getting information and, at the touch of their finger, rather than sitting in classrooms and, that more traditional teaching style. So I do think that would be good. I think it would take a lot of subtle changes just to get it in a mobile technology format, but it's a great idea. Some of these ideas I'm like, yes, we should have done it that way, but we're really happy to get it as part of the OSHA 30. I mean, that was what we saw as the most effective way of reaching the greatest number of people, was using this, widely utilized format of the OSHA 30. But, now it's like next steps. What are we going to do now? So I think that one's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. Did you, in your effectiveness studies, did you measure the program's effectiveness in preventing workers' comp injuries?
No, we didn't. We had a pretty short timeline for the data that we collected, so we probably took about 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Yeah, 4 weeks after people got trained and 2 weeks before is how we collected the data. We actually did 3 points in time, so depending on what condition you were in. So in that time frame, I don't know that it would have an impact on workers' comp claims, but I know the workers' comp groups we work with have definitely asked that question, because some of them have offered the FSL through their organizations with the goal of reducing accidents and injuries on job sites. I think I can say I hope in the long term, the more workers you have trained in the FSL, the more safety leaders you have walking around, the fewer accidents and injuries you'll have and fewer workers' comp claims, but we didn't actually test that.
Okay. Next question is, did you experience any problems with employees that couldn't read? So I guess participants, people that went through the FSL program.
Yeah, we did. So what's really great about the training is you don't really have to read much for the training, because the way it's delivered, someone's speaking, the trainer's giving you some of the information orally, and then the way we kind of perfect the skills is you play a video, and the characters in the video, it's like an animated video, will have some kind of safety hazard, and then the audience is presented with questions like, what should they do? What would the right thing be to do? Then they get to see an example of kind of doing it wrong or an example of doing it right, and then discuss. So for that, you don't need to be able to read, really. But for our surveys, we did come across that quite a bit, both for English speakers and Spanish speakers, that their foremen or lead workers would actually read the questions to some crew members, and so they could respond. But I do think that's a real consideration when you're working in construction, depending on kind of, what trade you're working with. That's one of the reasons that researchers have suggested there's higher accidents and injury rates among Spanish-speaking workers, is that they can't always read the safety hazards. So even if things were written in Spanish, not everyone can read Spanish just because you speak Spanish.
Yeah. All right. First, just one quick thing. We do have a couple more questions, but I also see someone has their hand raised. I cannot call on people individually, so if you do have a question, please type it out in either the chat or Q&A box. Our next question is, how long is the entire presentation?
Well, I guess that would kind of depend on the person delivering it. We say 2 hours. In most of the ones that we sat in on, it took 2.5 hours. Some went over, some went under. We provide a lot of the scenarios to go through in the video formats and the written formats and the role plays. I would say no one ever went through all of them. You get to choose the ones that either resonate with you as a trainer or are most related to your trade or or concerns that you've had. If you do fewer scenarios, it's going to go faster. If you do more scenarios, it's going to go slower. And some of the times, conversation was really flowing. People could have sat there all day making comments and giving examples and coming up with great strategies for safety. In other groups, people were pretty quiet and those went faster. So I would say 2 to 2.5 hours is what I most commonly saw. If you really want to go through it faster, I think that is possible, but I feel like in terms of what we've tested as an effective delivery for the FSL is 2 to 2.5 hours.
With it taking 2 to 2.5 hours, can it be incorporated into the OSHA 10-hour class? And if so, do you have recommendations for doing so, or is it just the OSHA 30-hour that it would fit in?
We've only done the OSHA 30-hour. My understanding is the OSHA 10 is just so packed with information that I don't know that they would want to give a fifth of their total training to the FSL, but they probably should because it would be a great use of time. But, you know, if you're giving an OSHA 10, trainers could always tack this on because anyone can utilize it. Anyone can download it and deliver it. It might just need to be an extra couple hours that people sit in there. They can have the option of doing so because there is just really important other content that you got to nail in the OSHA 10.
Okay, and I believe it's not like OSHA's only putting it forward as part of the OSHA 30-hour. Is that
you're correct? Yeah.
Okay. All right, that was the last question. If I somehow missed your question or if you think of something that we didn't ask during the webinar, always feel free to email me. We will get you an answer after the fact. And again, I will be sending out both this recording and a Spanish webinar recording with associated links and past FSL webinars. All of that should go out as soon as the recording is available. So if not tomorrow, then early next week.
Thank you, Jessica. You're amazing.
Very much, Stephanie. Take care, everyone.